morning, community, and welcome to another episode of Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson. Today is our lived experiences episode, and I am so excited to have my dear friend, Anthony Vultaggio. I lovingly refer to him as Anthony V. And, Anthony's claim to fame is being a curator of cool characters. Anthony, welcome. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you. So glad to be here with you.
How do you like that description? The curator of cool characters. That is who you are, my friend.
I love it.
You know some of the coolest people I know. So it's holiday season, and our theme for this month has been the gift of our presence, not presents that we unwrap, but our presence with one another. And Anthony, I remember the first time I met you, we were attending a business cohort, and your presence, Anthony, filled the room while you made space for other people. Your presence filled the room while you made space for other people. Anthony, how do you do that?
Oh, that what a beautiful image that is. It's almost an embracing image, right? And that allows for others to do the same. So that's a beautiful image. Never even thought of that. That's really great. And the how-to, I think that's also a great question. But I guess the first thing I would do is I'd step back and go, well, we're talking about gift of presence. So what's a gift? And it's funny because it's things people give, right? But it's not. A gift really is a freely giving, right? One is freely giving, but it's also something of value to you and to somebody else, right? So gift is a big word, and it's an important word. So, and the giving part. The other part I think people don't forget about gift is that giving part, the generosity part, is a sacrifice. It's something you could have. We can keep our presence to ourselves. We can keep our embrace, our warm embrace to ourselves, right? But you have to be willing to freely give something of value to someone else. And so one, I think we forget that it's got to be freely given, but a gift is also something where you do not expect anything in return. Have you ever been in a situation where perhaps you've wanted to give a gift and people don't receive it and aren't receiving it well? So it really is, a gift is truly about two people, freely given without expecting it in return.
Yeah.
Right.
That's beautiful. And when you were talking about that, what just immediately came to mind was the word gift. And in between the G and the T, there's that little word if.
Yeah.
If I give of myself, what
Yes.
if it isn't returned? If I give of myself, what if I'm judged? If I give of myself, what if? Let's talk about the if in that.
Well, but see, the if part, you're so right. The if part is really the us being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right. That's part of the gift, is vulnerability, because we're giving something ourselves. We're not sure if it would be well received.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that vulnerability. I could not be accepted. I could not be, right, whatever it might be. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there first. Right. And that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right.
And vulnerability scares people.
Look, a lot of people have trouble giving gifts because they're nervous if people will like them or not. Right. Well, it's the same too with the gift of ourselves. Will people like us? Right. But you have to be willing to put yourself out there and risk being rejected.
Yeah.
Right. Gift giving is really part of the fear of gift giving, is that fear of rejection.
Yeah. That is very deep, and it explains a lot of things. I think for me right now, it explains why people are so hesitant to go back into the workplace. So when COVID happened, everybody's freaking out about being on lockdown. And now, the beginning of 2021, everybody's freaking out about, I don't know how to go back into the office. And that goes back to that vulnerability and the hesitancy. Let's talk a little bit more about that, because we're wrapping up the year. We're getting ready to go into 2022. I want to know how you effectively and effortlessly are vulnerable in terms of interactions with people and the way you just lovingly orchestrate meaningful meetups. How do we
Mm.
get through that vulnerable space effectively and effortlessly the way you do?
Well, I think that now speaks to the second part of the phrase, which is presence,
Hmm.
right? That's where the presence part get come in. And presence, when you look at the word, it comes from an old French word that means the space around somebody, right? Which you so eloquently put even in the beginning, right? And it's so interesting that even such an old word has such an encompassing meaning that
Mhm.
is still valid today. So if you think about it, what is presence? Well, presence is more than just being there, right? That is a part of it. You
Mhm.
gotta you gotta be there. You gotta show up. But it's more than that. It can't be about the past or the future. It has to be about the now. So
Yeah.
being present, that doesn't just mean distractions, phone calls, having a phone, ping, and it's not just about distractions, but back to presence is really about who you are, your essence,
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
pre-essence, right? Your
Mhm.
pre-essence is you're putting forth who you are.
Your pre-essence. I love that. Keep pulling the thread on that. I never thought of it that way. And I like to think that I dissect words like we just did the if and the word gift.
Yeah.
Talk some more about that. Your pre-essence.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to putting forth who you are,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we ultimately are afraid of in terms of rejection. Is we fear showing ourselves, our true selves, for fear of rejection, and that's what stops people from entering into a room and embracing it. Because what if I don't get embraced back?
Mhm.
But then
That
there,
if.
then right back to the
Yeah.
if, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you talk about that, when you talk about the fear of what if I'm not embraced back, and we go
Hmm.
back to the word vulnerability, I was leading a workshop about 3 months ago, and I was talking with a group of men and women, but they were separate. So I asked women, let's talk about the word vulnerability. And a
Hmm.
lot of positive words came up. But when I
Hmm.
asked men, just men, the same
Hmm.
question, let's talk about vulnerability, weakness,
Hmm.
lacking, but
Hmm.
then in the moment, I picked up my phone and I said, "Well, let's look at the actual definition of vulnerability.
Hmm.
It takes courage and bravery.
Hmm.
That's really what vulnerability is, to put yourself out there not knowing how you're going to be received."
Yeah.
So back to where you were going about, we don't know how we're going to be received. Tell us how vulnerability, the courage and the bravery to put ourselves out there not knowing how we're going to be received. Tell us how that plays out for you. Because
Yeah.
I don't think anything scares you, especially when it comes to meeting people, Anthony. You just do it. You're just such a you're just such a warm presence. How do you do it?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think it comes down to what we value,
Mhm.
right? And where you're starting, what's your launching pad, and if you begin with the concept of everyone has a certain human dignity,
Mhm.
right, in and of themselves, that if you start there, then it's a wonderful launching pad, you
Mhm.
know. But I would say in terms of men in particular, right, it goes back to it's understanding and what we value. And back to definitions, we can talk about courage. We can talk about, what weakness is. But in general, I thought of something as you were sharing that, and it brings up the concept of mirrors. Mirrors are a really funny thing. We have them, everywhere. And
Mhm.
there's a ancient a proverb that says, um, when walking by a mirror, sometime notice the frame.
Okay. I'm
Right?
following you. I'm
If
with you.
there's more than just you, right? Because what happens in mirrors is we get totally lost in ourselves.
Mhm.
We get
Mhm.
totally lost in ourselves. right? And so I think it comes back to, what do you value? Valuing others, caring
Mhm.
about others,
Mhm.
um, right? If that is important to you, then how do you express it? Getting good at expressing it and showing it,
Mm.
right? But you have to first start with, what do you value? Valuing others,
Mhm.
others' feelings, others' emotions, what others might be going through, respecting others' beliefs, right? This is what do you value?
Mhm.
Yeah,
That is so important when you think about the frame and passing by a mirror, looking at yourself, but what are the values that frame who you see in the mirror? That
yeah,
is so deep, Anthony.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's what those kinds of things make us do, is think, right?
Yeah.
The reality is, most people hate looking in a mirror,
Mhm.
and if they do, it's for a brief glance,
Mhm. Mhm.
because it's really hard to look sometimes at yourself and accept it,
Mhm.
with all your imperfections, with
Mhm.
all right, with all that we have now. So that goes back to the vulnerability part.
Mhm. Mhm.
Can you look at a mirror and say, I accept myself?
And going back to the whole notion of the frame, again, if we're looking in the mirror
Yeah,
and we're
yeah.
thinking about the frame, the values that frame who we are, maybe sometimes we need to reprioritize our values and maybe change the frame within which the mirror resides. Oh, Anthony,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, there you go. I love it. See, you built on it, and
This
and
is why I
that's
love talking to you. This is why I love talking to you. So I'm thinking about the second time we met.
Mhm,
You had arranged a meetup in this
mhm,
beautiful facility with this gorgeous sprawling patio. And the
mhm,
patio was literally built for a large conversation to hold about 20 people in a lovely circle, fireplace, a place for some food,
mhm,
two different entryways for people to go in and out and circulate. But it was welcoming for about 20 people. And from that encounter, I met several people that I'm still in touch with today. And so we were all strangers, but we left with a potential for real relationships,
mhm.
Anthony. To me, that demonstrates the gift of presence. So, keeping that in mind, why do you arrange these meaningful meetups? What is the intention behind that for you?
Yeah. Well, I think that comes into, first thing that popped in the mind is intimacy, right? Regardless of the venue. Uh, remember the first time you ever fell in love. You might have been
Mm,
in as the old song says, in a crowded room, but all you could see was the person you loved right in front of you, right? And I think, again, that goes back to value. You valuing the person who is right in front of you, and so back to filling the room. If you can fill yourself with that feeling of wanting to connect, I have a desire to want to connect. And therefore, to me, I value that. Therefore, I want others to connect. And so, back to a gift freely given, to me, the gift that you can give is to pair people together
mhm,
that in some way can make each other better, connect. Uh, you know, uh, the old adage of that connection being that which connects kind of the whole world,
mhm,
right? Um,
mhm,
so that's where I find the joy. The joy for me is that I value connections, and therefore I want others to have that same connection.
mhm. So we met about 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And at that time, you were hosting a series of what I'm terming meaningful meetups.
Hmm.
Where is that vision going today, especially in light of COVID? We're
Yeah.
just now coming to another variation of it. People
Hmm.
are kind of skittish about whether or not they're going to come in or out, what have you. How can we be intentional and mindful when we are in each other's presence? I think you
Hmm.
mentioned earlier, and I know I've said this in my previous shows, so often we see a group of people like this, but it's a group of people.
Yeah.
They're paying attention to what's going on here and not what's going on here. So, Anthony, help us. How can we be more intentional and mindful when we are in one another's presence?
It's so true around the dinner table,
Mm,
right? around, you could be driving and you can see four people in a car, and hopefully not all four, because one of them should be driving, but
Should be.
three of them at the very least are all in their own phones, so they have people next to them, that they
Mhm.
feel a need to connect with someone or something outside of the very place that they're present,
Yeah.
right? And I think it goes back to value, because the value right now is we're through the ether, we're through space and time right now, but yet are we still connecting? I feel
Mm.
connected to you right now,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so regardless of where, people used to connect with letters that
Mhm.
would take days, if not
Yeah.
weeks, to get to someone,
Yeah.
right? You ever spend a little time reading an old love letter, or a letter sent from if you go to museums, or from a soldier sending to his family? You ever
Mhm.
read some of these? It's so powerful. It's a window into their soul,
Mhm.
and I feel that they're still connected. I don't feel like it's a dead letter at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
And I'm lucky to be reading it. But think of it, for family members, friends, anyone that have known that person, right? That's still alive today. It's
Mhm.
there. They're reaching out through the ether of time and space.
Mhm.
So I'm not limited, nor do I hope anyone else is, by time and space. Whether it's on video, by phone, by letter, right? Or in person. Be present, be vulnerable, be willing to connect, value connections, and give gifts
Mhm.
constantly, unceasingly, every day, um, of the gift of connection.
The way you speak, you always paint a picture for me. And when you were talking about, old letters from soldiers that were written years ago that we can still appreciate today, I'm reminded of a note that my dad wrote. I was a newlywed, and my husband and I were going up to visit my parents, and he wasn't able to be there, but he baked a cake and he left a handwritten note. And it basically said, "Sorry I couldn't be here, but I baked this cake for you. Hope you like it." And that note, Anthony, meant so much to me that I brought it home and I pinned it to one of the kitchen cabinets. And maybe about 5 years after, I noticed that it started to, get a little worn. So I put it in a plastic baggie and I stuck it back in there. And my dad has since passed. But every time I open that kitchen cabinet, I see that note and I think about Daddy.
Still there,
It's still there. And his
still
love
communicating with
still
you.
comes through that note. Yeah.
It's connection,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
still connecting. It's a beautiful thing. It's the ultimate message in a bottle,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
The concept of the message in the bottle. Someone throws a note in the
Hmm.
bottle and throws it out, and then years later, in a different world, in a different place, this bottle shows up and you read it.
Yeah.
We are connected. There's
Mhm.
something that does connect us, and so I would say during these times, um, no matter what there is, seek connection in whatever way you can. You know, um, and uh, and that note is a classic example, a love letter.
Mm. Yeah, that was definitely a love letter from Daddy.
Oh,
Now, I know that in previous experience of yours, you have been on the radio.
sure, sure.
Beautiful voice,
Uh,
very warm, welcoming, reassuring, encouraging. Tell us how, even being on the radio, and this was before everybody was constantly on Zoom to connect, right?
mhm,
How did you
mhm.
use that medium to connect with people?
Yeah, well, I would say that back to radio, we didn't have the visual,
Hmm.
and so the way you would connect was with uh, imagery,
Hmm.
visual pictures, right? With emotion. It still comes with connecting people, but even from that time, I've grown and changed so much. If I were to ever do that again, it would be and sound totally different, because I'm a different person than I
Yeah.
am today. But I would say that it's the same thing. Imagine yourself for a moment, um, speaking from a microphone into just machinery and it being broadcast to it, right? And that anyone with a receiver would catch that signal, right? And you're connected. And so, but how is this any different than what we're doing today?
Right.
How is this any different than, connection is connection, And so I guess I would say is, everyone communicates differently. And so learning how to understand the way others communicate, is also part of the fun of deciphering what they're trying to say.
Anthony, how can we be better receivers? And what I'm thinking about now is in the monologue that I offered this month, I was talking about the similarities between presents that we open and our presence. And that sometimes we can make assumptions about a small package and what that might hold versus a big package. So right now I'm thinking about Let's Make a Deal that I like to watch on occasion. And, there's door number 3 where you usually find the car. And then there's, or would you like, this box over here? And sometimes the box has the keys to the car, right? And sometimes the car is a huge zonk. And sometimes when we're looking at people and the packaging that we show up in as people, we make assumptions and we're not very good receivers of the gift.
Yeah.
How can we be better receivers of the gift, Anthony, regardless of what the packaging of people looks like?
Yeah, because I think it comes down to looking with a different set of eyes, right? I think people only that we have many senses, and people overvalue their eyes, right? And the reality is there's so much more to see or to utilize than your eyes and seeing another person for who they are, right? And so back to a gift. If a person is a gift, then allow time to unwrap them to see what truly is inside, right?
Yeah.
And I think most people, it goes back to presence. And another good P word is patience. Patient, be patient. When you are unwrapping that present, realize that what is being given inside is very precious, maybe even vulnerable. So be patient in unwrapping it and in receiving that gift, right? Imagine someone who takes the time to unwrap it, knowing that gift is very precious.
Yeah.
That's why I don't like the concept of course, I've been married 26 years, but the concept of speed dating, think of it, right? Rushing, getting right to the point. It's not waste time. You really get to see the person. Well, but these elements don't work. It's a checklist. I don't know. No, I see others as a gift that we get the privilege to unwrap if they're willing over time and being patient to really reveal who they are.
I love how you just put that. First of all, like you, I'm very glad that I didn't go through the speed dating era because I can't imagine. I kissed enough frogs to realize that when my husband came along, he was the prince that I've been waiting for. But when you talk about the time required to unwrap the presence of another person, that is so profound. I remember a time I was sitting and talking with my husband, and I'll just be real transparent. When we first got married, like I said, I dated enough to know that I saw a good quality guy in my husband. However, I was still very much in the mindset of, I'm going to prove to you that all I need you for is companionship. I don't need you to pay my way for anything. I don't need you to give me anything. And I was very much, for the first 5 years of our marriage, still trying to prove to him that I could be independent. And one day I just kind of sat down and I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I haven't been acting right. Can you forgive me? I said, I think another guy probably would have said that I'm not doing this anymore. I said, why have you put up with me? And he said, I knew you'd grow out of it. That is a wonderful example of giving ourselves the gift of time to unwrap somebody
Mm.
until they can deal with their own baggage. And sometimes we got to do that, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a potential spouse, whether it's a family member, whether it's a coworker. Sometimes, to your point, we have to be patient and take the time unwrapping all these layers, these onion layers that we like to say, peel back the onion of people, because we don't know what people are wrapped up in and how that behavior shows up, not to be nasty, but as a protective mechanism, going back to that vulnerability. I'm afraid that if you really see that I need you more than I'm letting on, you're going to use that against me. And I think and I'm sitting here processing this with you in the moment. I think that's what it was. I was so vulnerable that I wanted to make sure, nope, I'm not going to really let you know what's going on in here, because then you're going to have one up on me. And how do we get over that faster?
It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. Right. And again, I had someone tell me once, I said, that we had a great meeting and I look forward to getting to know them better, and they said, well, you know what they say about 5-year relationships? And I said, no, what do they say? It takes 5 years. And I thought, that's interesting. Is right. You can't you can't rush things, right? I mean, there's an so I would just say that we live in a disposable society,
Cancel culture.
right? But it's
Yeah.
disposable. It's the disposable shaver. It's the toothbrush you use and you throw away. It's the people come and come and go, or we have to give things time. When things were made in the past, they were made with care, love, and time, right? Coming from an Italian family, I will tell you, the sauce takes time, right? There's a difference. There's a reason why it takes so much time to make sauce, right? And so, but something like that is a great example. So yeah, we're not disposable. We have each one of us has a very precious gift inside, and I just like to connect with that. And so for me, in time, I do whatever I can for people feel uncomfortable unwrapping themselves, to where at some point, at some time, I'll get to enjoy being in their real presence.
Wow. Boy, I tell you, I knew this was going to be a very insightful conversation, but as usual, Anthony, you just take things to the next level, which is why I enjoy it when you and I are just on the phone, having a conversation. You're so giving of yourself. And when we first started this conversation today, you talked about freely giving. Where does that come from for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes back from my faith tradition, right? And that's where I think I first learned the concept, and then it permeates through every other facet of my life. But freely giving without expecting is something that is truly a beautiful concept. And there is another word for that, and that's love.
Yeah.
It's love. And so back to even what you had shared between the note from your father, the experience between you and your husband and your relationship, right? Love is a beautiful thing.
And you're right, it cannot be rushed. My husband and I have been happily married. We celebrated 30 years this year. And I can say this without, it's not just because we're on the air, because a minute ago I'm thinking, did you overshare? But you know what? It's called real conversations for a reason. Keeping it real for a reason. So I'm always going to keep it real. But when we talk about, relationships and the depth of a good relationship, it does take time, and it takes a willingness to say, well, I'll keep it real if you'll keep it real. I'll share my warts if you'll share your warts. I'll be vulnerable enough to share, my insecurities if you'll be vulnerable enough to share your insecurities. It's a give and take but it's got to start with somebody first. How do we figure out who's going to make the first move when it comes to being vulnerable?
Courage.
Yeah, bravery.
Bravery.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what being first is. And so I think when it comes to the values, teaching those values, right? What is truly courage? Some of those folks, their definition of what courageous is, right? If they had a chance to unwrap what that is,
Mm-hmm.
what they're really getting at. Sometimes, quite honestly, when I hear things like that, I think of the gift concept. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't truly unwrapped what they're
Mm-hmm.
really feeling. That's just
Mm-hmm.
easy. I think it's easy, uh, especially for men, to say that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because what happens? You stop there because you want to respect it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there's more going on there. There's more going on there.
So, what do we do, Anthony, when we give of ourselves and it's just stomped on? And this is how some people continue to build a wall after wall after wall, like, nope, not doing it anymore.
Mm.
So, I'm going to build a wall and not let you get in to hurt me. But at the same time, when we've heard this, that same wall also keeps me imprisoned. How do we get past that?
Oh, that's so good. That's so
Yeah.
good. Well, I think that's part of the personal growth, right? And back to making definitions in your lives.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I? What do I value? Am I being true to what I value? Am I being congruent with what, I say? And the reality is none of us are perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But are we growing there? Are we heading there? And some of that is taking back control of of the definitions of things, like
Mm-hmm.
courage and bravery, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
love. It's taking back those definitions and and that I think that's where I think that's where you start. You know, and I think that's part of where you say, "Here's what I value, and I'm going to be present. I'm going to adhere to what I say I believe,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm going to try to do it more and more every day. And part of that is I believe that every life is precious, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore there's something of value in them. And so I want to connect,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then you say, okay, how can I do that better every day? How can I get better at that? How can I be more understanding? How can I be more forgiving? How can I be more loving? How can I be these things so that every day more and more people connect with you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so so my value is not fearing being rejected, though I do and I still do. A lot of times in sales, for example, people say, the biggest fear is fear of rejection, and you got to learn how to overcome that. People overcome it. Most people overcome it by creating that wall.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're not connecting to anybody.
That's right.
So no, I say the fear of rejection is part of what makes you vulnerable, that makes you able to connect. So I don't want to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
I just do it despite of it.
Mm-hmm.
I still fear rejection, but I do it anyway.
I find it hard to believe that you fear rejection because you just, like I said, your presence just fills a room, and the way you carry yourself, the way you care for others, just by opening your mouth, it just exudes an openness. So, my question for you, and this is why I love this particular episode of the Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita, the lived experiences that I like to talk about with my guest. And today we're talking about your lived experiences, just being who you are. When you bring in the aspect of sales and the fact that there's a lot of no's before you get to a yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's set that aside. As a person, Anthony, share with us a time where you felt like you put yourself out there and it didn't go the way you expected. How did you get over that? And why do you keep going back?
Quite honestly, that's kind of like the story of my life.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me like how I talk about and I do the things I do today. It's because I haven't always been like this, right? I am now consciously choosing to be who I am. I am now saying every day, and then at the end of the day, evaluating, did I live up to what I said I was? Right? And before, I used to look at it and look in the mirror and go, no, I did this, I did this, I did this. And it's like, I'm nothing like I say I am or purport myself to be. But it was a valuable tool to go, okay, but can I get better? Yes. Tomorrow I'm going to be better, you know? And so the reality is I still get rejected. The reality is I still try to connect with people and they don't want to be connected with, you know, the reality is, and so I have to remind myself, why am I doing this for? Right? And so I do that too. That's part of the work. And that's part of the work of every day. But I would tell you is, for me, because I value something more than my fear. Right? And I know I will get rejected, and but I do it anyway. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. I'm trying to help people, right? And that's more important than my fear. Some of it, and I know it's not necessarily. We live in a culture also where it's all about me, right? And it's easy, quite honestly, to be all about me. What's hard is to be about others, and so that takes work, and that takes the me part, the ego part, kind of diminishing. You know, there was someone in another faith tradition that told me in their religious book that they attempt to take away all references to I and me. So every time that they describe whatever value or whatever, it's all about we and us. And I thought, what a beautiful thought that is. You know, in fact, I try to use that in my own way, in the sense of saying, you know, oh yeah, we did this. We, you know, we and us, and you know, and there's some value to that.
Wow. Well, Anthony, you always make me think. You make me think really deeply, but it's always in a way that leaves me feeling really good. I really hope that our audience can get some sense of why we're emphasizing presence, and to share our presence in the present, and not necessarily about presents that we unwrap, right?
Right.
As we're going into 2022, and I've said I'm coming to really appreciate the gift of 2020 as really being an opportunity to slow down, step back, and be present. Because if you think about it, you know, families had no choice but to be underfoot. And a lot of people really saw the opportunity in that. Some people were like, okay, the opportunity is great. Let's get back to whatever normal is. And I can appreciate both ends of that spectrum. When we're thinking about moving into 2022, Anthony, what are your thoughts for how you will show up and encourage people through these meaningful meetups that you organize to be present with their presence in the present?
Well, I guess I would say the me part starts with working on me, right? And then so what I promise to do in the coming year is to be more present, is to reflect more of the values that I say I hold, and therefore being willing to be vulnerable first, and give others the opportunity to share in that connection, and perhaps the courage, and so I guess I, after some, you know, a moment or two of reflection, would say that that's that's what I plan to do.
basically just continuing to be you.
Well, a better me, a
Yeah.
better version of me,
Yeah.
a better version of me every day.
Mhm.
And, and that for others to seek their best self every
Mhm.
day.
Yeah. I like to try and um, leave the thought with the participants whenever I do a workshop, whether it's virtual or online, to strive for 1% every day, whether it's a 1% raised awareness, whether it's a 1% improvement, just
Yeah.
1% every day over time. And you know this, in the world of finance, where compound interest and things like that, 1% every day makes a huge difference in how we show up for ourselves and with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, give ourselves time too. I
Hmm.
think that's what I heard you say, right?
Hmm.
Be patient with
Hmm.
ourselves.
Hmm.
Change doesn't happen overnight. We may make a decision overnight, but change doesn't happen overnight, you know? And I think back to the mirror, Anita, I think, a lot of times the reason people like looking at the mirror is because they only look at their warts and their
Hmm.
imperfection, right? To learn to see that we're more than just that,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and to I think those warts and those imperfections uh, is the stick we beat ourselves with,
Hmm.
you know, and to understand, I think it could those things, you know, some of my past warts and imperfections are part of why I value what I value today.
Hmm.
So in a way, you got to say, well, that led me to here, and I like
Hmm.
where I am now.
Yeah. Hmm. I have said that sometimes there's there's such potential to connect through our pain, because based on the pain that I've experienced, I come out on the other side with some wisdom, but primarily to know that the pain that I was that was inflicted upon me, that I've grown through, I never want to be the cause of that source of pain for someone else. Number one. Number two, sometimes based on the pain that we've experienced and the circumstances around that, it gives us the capacity to extend the time to someone else who hasn't yet gotten to the other side of that pain, so that we can have, like you said, Anthony, compassion.
Yeah. Well, you got to be able, I think being able to see yourself in that other person
Hmm.
helps in being compassionate, right? And
Hmm.
say, "Oh, I was there once, or I felt that." You know, there's a
Hmm.
there's a pastor who has a great line about "Don't waste the pain." You know,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
and that sticks.
Hmm.
Don't waste it. Use it to help others who are experiencing that. Because you're there from experience.
Hmm.
You know, and so yeah, you know, I think if you can again find, uh, the that's what's special about someone else,
Hmm.
and um, then you can too learn to love them.
Mm. Anthony, thank you so much for giving us a head start into 2022 and how we can be more intentional about showing up for ourselves well, so that we can be with others well, so that we can be intentional about sharing and exchanging the gift of presence. Thank you
Hmm.
so much for joining me today, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Community, I hope you feel like you've met a friend in Anthony. This man dropped some pearls of wisdom today. I hope that they will stay with you all the way through 2022. Until next time, this is Dr. Nita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.